Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. Today we got a little review of a very cool book that I've actually had for a while, but I've got so much to read, it just took me a while to get to. So better late than never, they always say. I'm talking about the 2018 publication from author Martin Popoff, of course, the great hard rock and heavy metal journalist who's written a ton of books. All right, also one of the editors of the Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles magazine for many, many years. Also has done work on their online website. It's called Welcome to My Nightmare, 50 Years of Alice Cooper. Check that out. Okay. As you can see, this is a very large book. It's paperback. It's heavy. The one thing I will say about this book, I immensely enjoyed it, by the way, because I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, and I think this was one of the... I've read a couple Alice books, but this might have been the most enjoyable. I will say it's a little awkward to read because it is so large. It's like a coffee table book, and it's heavy. So if you like late night reading in bed, this is probably not the book for you because very heavy to hold. It gets, hard on the wrist at times. But, if you sit in an easy chair on the couch or whatever and you can get nice and comfortable, then no problems there, right? Or maybe you might opt for the digital copy if one exists. I'm sure it does. This was put out by Weimer Publishing, W-Y-M-E-R Publishing. For those of you interested, ISBN number 978-1-908-724-91-5. Okay, so... what's this book about? You might ask. All right. Well, it's basically, as most of Martin's books are, it centers on the recorded career of Alice Cooper, the band, and Alice Cooper, the solo artist. Okay, so we'll go all the way back to the beginning, from the Pretties for You album, and even before that, as they talk about all the original Alice Cooper group, Dennis Dunaway and Glenn Buxton, and so on and so forth, the whole crew, and how they kind of got into music, met each other, formed the band, and went on to become a very, very big band on the hard rock scene in the early 80s. Michael Bruce and Mr. Smith, the whole nine yards, right? The whole original band. So I'll take you kind of through as best I can. Just kind of show you a little bit about what this book is all about. All sorts of cool live shots, studio shots, promotional shots. A lot of interview snippets with various members of the band because, of course, Martin has interviewed all these guys many times over the years. And each chapter is basically broken down, by year and subsequently by release. Okay. A lot of great photographs in here. I mean, just the photographs and the kind of the cool memorabilia stuff. And obviously, as you can imagine, the longer chapters are towards the front half of the book, centering on those classic albums. So, if you're a big fan of like Love It to Death and Killer and School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies, Welcome to My Nightmare, all that kind of stuff, a lot of information on those albums. Okay, and the recording of those albums and the songs and how the albums sold and performed. All that kind of stuff. I'm actually specifically trying to get a couple of some fantastic pictures in here, photographs. I mean, some of these are really cool. Also, if you're interested in, the kind of darker side of the Alice Cooper story, so, the breakup of the band, Alice's descent into alcoholism and, cocaine addiction. A lot of info on that as well. Very candid conversations with various people, Alice himself, as well as people close to him, about how dire it really got. A lot of folks who, musicians who played with him on these albums and tours, telling their part of the story. All right, this is actually one of my favorite photographs in this entire book. I think that's a very, very cool shot. And of course, they go into the kind of change in sound with the early '80s, the more kind of new wave punk electronic type stuff, from the blackout years, so to speak. Okay, so Zipper Catches Skin, Flush the Fashion, Special Forces, and Dada. A lot of information on that, as well as Alice getting sober. Here's some pictures from the live shots from the blackout years. You can see how rail thin and just not well Alice is looking right around that time. Of course, he's deep into cocaine and crack addiction at the time. But then, of course, the comeback, right? Alice gets clean a couple years later, jumps onto the, hard rock metal bandwagon. I'm trying not to call it hair metal. Of course, that's the easiest term to use because everybody knows what that's all about. But, some big albums. Of course, you got the Trash album, which sold a lot of copies. And then it goes into not great detail, but breaks down all the ensuing years into the 90s and the 2000s and talks about, all of the other albums post that, Brutal Planet and Dragon Town and, all those other... Along Came a Spider, Last Temptation, all the follow-up Dirty Diamonds, all the follow-up albums, all the way up until this goes right up into, did this cover Paranormal? Yes, right up to Paranormal, which is actually the final chapter of the book, okay? But like I said, a really good read. What I like about it, there's a lot of in-depth talk about the albums, about the tours. So if you want to know all about those tours and, who opened up for Alice, who did Alice open up for, that sort of thing. That's very interesting stuff, at least it was for me anyway. And, it gives you a chance to kind of reminisce about these albums and the great songs that are on them and so on and so forth. And one of the great things about reading, specifically Martin's books, but any good rock biography, is it usually instigates you going back and visiting the catalog, right? So as you can imagine, over the last week and a half since I've been reading this, I've been listening to a lot of Alice Cooper in my spare time. So really cool to revisit not only the classic albums, like Killer and $1 Billion Babies and, all the early stuff, Love It to Death, the albums that I really, really treasure quite a bit. But, I've been listening to Brutal Planet, Last Temptation, Dragon Town, Hey Stupid, all that kind of stuff. Because I like all, and in fact, I also went and re-listened to the Blackout Years albums. And I will say, Flush the Fashion's pretty damn good. That's a pretty damn good album. I was listening to Special Forces last night, too. And I'm not as enamored with that album as well. Dada, I'm still not a big fan of Dada. Zipper Catch Your Skin is okay. So I think that... and I've had those for a long time, and I was never a huge fan. I liked them, but I was never a huge fan of those albums. I think that kind of reading a lot of kind of what was going on behind the scenes during the making of those albums has kind of prompted me to kind of tackle them again with a different perspective, if that makes any sense at all. Sometimes you have to do that with albums from bands or artists that you really love that just really don't click with you, and then you kind of have to force yourself to come back to them from a different angle and try and listen to them with a different perspective. Similar to what I did a year or two ago with a lot of the Rush mid-late 80s catalog, also with the Genesis 80s catalog, right? Albums that never really liked much in years past, but, because you love the artist so much, you kind of force yourself to go back and revisit and try and find a new acceptance for them. So I've been doing that over the last week or so with the Blackout Years for Alice Cooper, and I think I'm growing a kind of a different perspective, a different appreciation of them. So anyway, long story short, welcome to my nightmare, the 50 Years of Alice Cooper. I highly recommend this if you're an Alice Cooper fan. Like I said, it's a big book, so be prepared. But if you can get yourself a copy, I think you'll love it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I've read a couple Alice Cooper biographies. This easily was my favorite just because it kind of covers all the grounds. Right? It talks about the music, talks about the band, the tours, and all the kind of crazy stuff going on behind the scenes. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. What do we got coming up? We got Ranking the Studio Albums of Billy Joel. Ranking the studio albums of Captain Beyond, and all sorts of stuff happening this weekend. We're going to be talking some Halloween, some Symphony X, some Iced Earth, a lot of power metal stuff going on this weekend. So you don't want to miss any of that. All right, guys? So stay tuned. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.